Hi everyone, I'm Rabia. I'm the Customer Support Manager here at Charity Digital, and today I'm also your host here in the Wisteria Room. I hope you're excited. We've got a jam-packed, informative day ahead. I'm going to hand over to the experts now for our first session about making the most and making your charity stand out. We have Rachel Marshall. She's the Fundraising and Communications Manager at Dig Deep. We have Angela Richmond, the founder of Red Fox Research, and Tom Dufresne, the Manager of Customer Success at Enthuse. Just a bit of information for you. As the session's running, you can use the Q&A button in Zoom to ask your burning questions. You can upvote questions, and we also have the chat function so you can talk to everyone else within the room. I hope you find it interesting, as I'm sure I will too. Thank you.
Hello everyone and welcome to our Be More Digital session. I'm Tom from Enthuse, and today we are asking one of the big questions: who did you last donate to? First of all, before we get started, I want to encourage everyone on the session to ask as many questions as they want in the chat. Please feel free to say what organization that you're from, and we will respond to as many questions as we can at the end of the session. First and foremost, just do some introductions. So as I mentioned, my name is Tom and I manage the account management team at Enthuse. Worked in the sector for about 8 years, on and off in charity fundraising roles, and most recently working in the tech sector, formerly at Just Giving, and now at Enthuse. Over to you, Angela.
Hi, I'm Angela. I'm the founder of Red Fox Research. We're a market research agency looking at all things digital, really, business to business, consumers, how people's digital lives are. And we've just been working quite recently with Enthuse on their donor pulse as an independent supplier.
Hi, so I'm Rachel and I'm the Fundraising and Communications Manager at Dig Deep. Dig Deep is an international development charity, and we focus on creating opportunity for Kenya's poorest residents by ensuring access to clean water, good sanitation and hygiene.
Brilliant, thank you very much, guys. I guess to kick us off, Angela, could you introduce the Donor Pulse research study and tell us a little bit more about the methodology that you used?
Yeah, sure. So it's a new study, as you say, and we wanted to look at people's patterns of giving, but not just giving, fundraising as well. So how willing they're involved to get involved into fundraising. So the first benchmark stage of this, we went out and interviewed 1,000 members of the UK public, and we went across generations from 18 to 80, so a really broad range of different people, men and women. And as I say, it's a benchmark phase, so we'll be looking to track some of the things we found over time, but also pick up on some other hot topics as we repeat the study every 3 months. And what we're looking at here is the different generations. So the 18 to 24-year-olds are who we generally talk about as being Gen Z. 25 to 39 is the millennials. And then we go through to the older generations. And it's a really interesting shaped graph, actually, because we know traditionally that older people have tended to give more to charity, and that certainly is the case over the first few months of the coronavirus crisis. But what really surprised us was how much giving there was amongst 18 to 24-year-olds, Gen Z. In fact, 7 out of 10 of those had made a donation to charity. So if we include giving to the NHS, 84% of Gen Z have donated to charity in the last 3 months. And one of the things about Gen Z is that they seem to be the most passionate about that extra giving to the NHS. So the gap that we saw between giving to mainstream charity, if you like, and NHS was biggest in Gen Z, but they were actually the most generous generation that we saw in that 3-month period. And that's actually signalled quite a change in their behaviour. We do know that older people tend to donate to charity a lot, but for 50% of Gen Z, half of them said that they had been more likely to give to charity than they had in the previous 3 months. So they had become charity givers, if you like. You know, as a benchmark stage in this tracking study, that's something that we'll want to watch really carefully. And I think for charities out there, they're a generation that you really need to start thinking about and gathering as much insight as you can, because clearly they will behave in quite different ways to some of the donors that you might be used to engaging with.
Thanks, Angela. I think that absolutely fits with our own data of how younger donors are giving more, and that sevenfold uplift in donations among Gen Z we've seen that on our platform throughout lockdown, around the kind of meteoric rise of things like virtual events. Rachel, I want to bring you in at this point to talk about your experience and a little bit more about Dig Deep. Obviously, you recruit a lot of young people as volunteers, as fundraisers for your challenge events. A lot of them are university students. Can you tell us a little bit more about the demographics of your supporters, how you engage them, and how you think that kind of differs to maybe how more mainstream charities engage their supporters, just to touch on what we think other charities might be able to learn from the way you do things?
Yeah, of course. Just to give a tiny bit of background, as Tom said, we work with a lot of university students and a lot of young people through our challenge program. So every year we do international challenges, mainly a Kilimanjaro challenge, where we take a few hundred students that have signed up to that challenge out to complete Kilimanjaro. And throughout the year prior to that, they complete fundraising for us with our support. But I just think students, they're so passionate, and we've always seen that passion within them, and it's just finding the right way to engage them with a cause or with something that they want to do. So I think this is why our challenge program works so well, because it's such an exciting opportunity. Like climbing Kilimanjaro is the trip of a lifetime, and it's initially how I actually found out about Dig Deep, was taking on that challenge myself. And it's something that they can really engage with, and they can also engage their friends in that, and kind of connecting with them on that level is where we've really put our time and our focus and our energy into, especially over the last few months. So we've really had to change up our kind of strategy of reaching them, so using a lot of social media, connecting with them that way. Yeah, so one of the main aspects for us as well is kind of word of mouth, and I think that's where the importance of the Gen Z generation really comes in. We spend a lot of time building effective personal relationships with our fundraisers, and then they continue to spread that word around their friends, around their family members, and that's how they really get engaged. And I think what's been really interesting, and I think this ties in very much to Enthuse's research, is we've seen so many of our student fundraisers who have really had to, think on their feet over the last few months, because they were supposed to take on a challenge in September. Obviously, that had to be postponed due to the coronavirus outbreak. But they were still fundraising throughout the outbreak, and the amount of creative ideas they came up with was so incredible to watch, and also the amount of young people that were really engaging with them in those kind of creative events. And I think what's really important, and what I've seen a lot of, is the young people making smaller donations. So they're donating regularly, and they're not afraid to donate £1, £2, £3, £5, which I think we maybe undervalue the kind of importance of that size donation as well.
Giving has become more ad hoc. So the biggest thing we saw a change in is the likelihood that people would make a one-off donation. So fantastic that people are seeing causes and feeling engaged and wanting to give in not an impulsive manner, but an instinctive manner, I would say. Where we haven't seen so much of an uplift is in the regular donations and subscriptions. And I think that's something that charities will want to address. How do you get people engaged and onto that next level where they will start to give more freely?
Yeah, I think obviously, regular givers are kind of like the gold dust of things when it comes to fundraising. Like, everybody wants to have an amazing group of regular givers, like who wouldn't? But they are harder to get. And I mean, if I'm totally honest, up until a couple of years ago, we didn't really have a proper way of kind of inviting people to become regular givers for Dig Deep, and kind of giving people the recognition that they deserved. So this is what led us to building our Ambassadors Club. So our Ambassadors Club is essentially a way for us to recognize people's contributions to Dig Deep, and it is also where we kind of recognize people as regular givers. So if you become a regular giver for Dig Deep, of anything from £2 upwards, then you join our Ambassadors Club at gold level. So it's a tiered structure, and it's basically our way of trying to transition our young fundraisers. So as I said, we have a few hundred fundraisers every year that take on this incredible challenge with us, have been heavily involved with us for 1 year, like talking on a day-to-day basis, receiving lots and lots of emails, and we have a really strong relationship with them. They do this amazing thing that is a life-changing challenge for them, and then it's kind of like, what happens now? So the Ambassadors Club is really for us to try and transition those people to become lifelong supporters of Dig Deep. And many of them do already become lifelong supporters, but maybe not in the traditional sense of being a regular giver. And we really try to basically give them that recognition, that structure. So as soon as they finish their challenge, and this is something that, you know, it's still a learning process for us, like we're still growing our Ambassadors Club, and hopefully improving it year on year. But to give an example, last year when they finished their challenges, I was in Tanzania with them, and I would meet them at the end of their climb, and we would kind of summarize their achievements. We'd do a celebration where we present them with their certificates, but then we would also give them a real insight into what their achievement of climbing Killian, how much, the thousands of pounds that they had raised, and the difference that had made to Dig Deep, by telling them one of the kind of more poignant stories of one of our community members that we work with. We share that story with them to remind them why they're there, and then also to tell them about the difference that a tiny donation of £2 a month could make in the long term to Dig Deep, and how they could continue to support us.
I wonder if we can jump to our next finding now and talk a little bit about the demographics of people taking part in events, especially around virtual events, and what did the findings show from our Donor Pulse survey on that?
Sure, but I think the good news is that, you know, we know people are still willing to give to causes, but I think what's really great is that they're also very willing to get involved in fundraising. And just listening to Rachel talking there, that clearly is important for engagement. You know, if we can't get people to be regular givers, then becoming involved in a cause personally is the next best thing, clearly. 47% of the people we spoke to said they would actually consider getting involved in a virtual event to raise money.
I think touching on that, obviously touching on the way virtual events have gone from kind of niche to mainstream. I know you've mentioned this, Rachel, that obviously for Dig Deep, it's about these big headline, big challenge events, you know, these really kind of staple events. How have you navigated the restrictions of the pandemic around these events? How have you kind of shifted your strategy to accommodate this change?
Well, it's been a challenge for sure. I think that's pretty obvious to everyone. And yeah, I mean, initially, in terms of what we actually did with those events that were happening, back in the end of March, when all of this was, you know, kind of really kicking off, we just took the decision to postpone all of our international challenges, for safety and also for peace of mind for our fundraisers, so that they had a little bit longer to fundraise. In terms of how we've actually kind of adapted and kept all of those people engaged, so obviously they're supposed to be taking on the challenge of a lifetime, the pub quiz isn't quite the same as climbing Kilimanjaro. But, you know, we had to adapt. I'm sure lots of people on this call as well, we got involved in the 2.6 challenge, and I think naturally, because a lot of our fundraisers that are enrolled with us or have fundraised for us in the past have done something like climb a mountain, a challenge like that is really up their street. So we saw quite a lot of engagement with that, lots of people getting out there running, cycling, doing all sorts of kind of weird and wonderful things. So that was really great to see. And then kind of from then on, it's been a bit of a learning curve. We did, actually just the other day, we did a virtual gin tasting event. So we did a couple of pub quizzes as well, but obviously I think everyone got sick of pub quizzes quite quickly. I mean, I used to have like a Saturday pub quiz that died off after about a 10-week stint, thank God. So we were trying to come up with ways to like be a bit different, like give people want to engage in the virtual events, but then they also don't want to be bored. They don't want to be doing the same thing over and over again. And we did a gin tasting event where we partnered with a gin company and did a virtual tasting and then live Q&A. And that went really, really well. And I think it was because it was a different offering, and also because people actually got something out of it. So yes, they were paying money to be there, but then they got an amazing parcel in the post with 5 different types of gin and like a few other nice little bits and bobs. So I think it's kind of finding the balance between having a good virtual event that's exciting, but also people feeling like they're parting with their money for something fun in return. They don't just want to pay £5 to attend a pub quiz that they've attended 100 times over. So yeah, we've certainly had to adapt our fundraising strategy and kind of just go with the flow really, and just be quite reactive. And I think not shy away from doing things that we might not normally do. So, you know, typically we might not normally do a gin tasting event because we're like, oh, well, some people maybe not like the alcohol side of things. Like, is it a bit of a taboo thing? But actually, we've got so many different supporters. We've got a huge group of young people, majority of whom like drinking. Then we've also got lots of their parents who have donated to them and then stayed engaged. And then quite a few older supporters as well. So it's just not shying away from things that maybe are a bit different, and really giving them a go and just trying to create really engaging content. And the other thing that we did as well was, obviously we've got this pool of fundraisers that have fundraised in the past and they're no longer active, and we were like, right, what is their connection to Dig Deep? How can we re-engage those people? And for most of them, it's climbing Kilimanjaro. So we, in August, when they all summited previously, we were like, right, it's a Kiliversary, let's celebrate that. And we did a little campaign called Raise to the Roof of Africa, where we tried to get people to raise money and race up the mountain against the people that should have been climbing. But we also got everyone to share their memories. So although maybe the campaign wasn't a huge success financially, we had countless numbers of people sharing their Kili memories, people re-engaging on their old Facebook chats. And I think it's really important not to undervalue that kind of engagement as well, because it means that they're thinking about their experience, they're thinking about Dig Deep, we can get involved, and then potentially we can harness that going forward.
That's brilliant. I think that kind of ties back into that community aspect as well, is kind of building that long-term loyalty to your brand, and not forgetting about people that have done your challenges before, re-engaging them at a time when you were aware of their circumstances. You knew that they were all experiencing lockdown, because who wasn't? So it was a chance to kind of reach out and rebuild that connection.
Yeah, so that's really interesting, actually, what Rachel's been talking about, people wanting to connect, because one of the top reasons for people wanting to get involved in virtual events that we saw was that people want to do an activity that connects them. And, you know, I don't think we should get really bogged down in pub quizzes. We're not just talking about things that are in the here and now. Connecting can just be being part of a community of people that are doing something similar to yourself. So I think this absolutely underlines that there's a huge demand there for doing that.
Fantastic. And I think we also touched a little bit around the importance of brand and the importance of messaging to reinforce the brand. Can we explore a little bit about what impact do you think that's had for charities in the long term around brand recall, Angela?
Yeah, sure. So if we kind of look at online giving, 59% of donors have made an online donation over that 3-month period. But I think what was really concerning about those particular donors that donated online is that 1/3 of them couldn't actually remember the name of the charity that they donated to. And we call this give and forget. And if I go back to the point that I made earlier about needing to turn one-off donors into regular donors, then that's a real kicker, that they can't remember who they're giving to. So there's a challenge there for getting people more engaged. And actually, if we look at the different generations, then there's quite a high correlation in the ability to remember the name of the charity. So the Gen Z generation, the younger generation, are least likely to be able to recall the name of the charity that they've donated to. So they're giving very much in the here and now. They're not making that connection and engagement to give in the longer term. So clearly charities need to find a way to engage them and make them more sticky.
Yeah, I think this is a nice point to bring you back in, Rachel, and ask about how you have tackled this at Dig Deep. Obviously, you've mentioned it's a young supporter base. How do you make that brand consistent across all those different touch points? And how have you had to kind of retool that during the coronavirus pandemic?
Definitely. I mean, I think it's something that we're certainly still learning about and trying to get better at, and I'm sure everyone is experiencing the same thing as well. But I think the main things are kind of using really high quality imagery and making sure you're using your brand colors really strongly, so that when either they don't remember the name of your brand, when they see it again, or they see a Facebook advert or they see a post, they remember it, and it kind of like links them back to that previous thing. And also not shying away from repetition. I'm certainly guilty of this. I always feel like I need to be saying something new all the time, which just isn't true. I think especially this really highlights, this findings really highlighted that for me, that lots of people may give to us once and then they might not see our Facebook page ever again, or they might come across it really randomly, or they might bump into us at a fair or something. And all they've ever done before is donate and not remembered who we are. So I think repeating what we're all about, the same images, reminding everybody kind of the core aspects, like the core things that we do, is just really important. And then the basics of obviously setting brand guidelines, making sure everyone's sticking to those, being really consistent in our posting as well. So even those that just followed us on a whim or stumbled across our website, they get something regular from us, and they kind of expect it, and then they start to remember who we are. But yeah, I think it's difficult, definitely. I think the other thing that's really helped as well, and this is just a little plug for you guys at Enthuse, is having your donation platform. The fact that if someone's on our website and they can use an integrated donation platform run by you, or if they end up somewhere else, all the branding's the same color, just really, really helps so people don't feel alienated by those changes.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good point in terms of how supporting charities to kind of take back that kind of digital shopfront has never been more important. Now people are spending more and more time online and more time exposed to those kind of touch points that maybe charities have less control over than they should. I wanted to quickly recap everything that we've learned. Obviously, we've touched on the 4 biggest findings of the report, but there's plenty of information that we haven't really explored in any great detail. So obviously we've talked about Gen Z, we've talked about the kind of big discrepancy between one-off versus recurring donations, the rise of hybrid events as an evolution from virtual events, how they've kind of been iterated on, and we're now looking at kind of really how do we drive that community aspect of those virtual events. And finally, and probably most importantly for the long term, is the importance of brand and building that brand loyalty. Thank you so much. Obviously, a really big thank you to you, Rachel, for sharing your experiences. Angela, massive thanks for talking us through the Donor Pulse survey, and thank you to our friends at Charity Digital as well for keeping us honest. And thank you to you, the audience, for listening. Most importantly, we wouldn't be here if there weren't people to listen to us. We're now going to go over to the chat and take some questions.
Hi everyone. I'm going to head over to the questions that we've had come in. We've got a few. So the first question I have for our panelists is, do you engage most young people through unis or student unions?
Looks like a question for me. It's a real mixture. So we work with universities, like departments. We also work through student unions, and we also do a lot of advertising. So we do kind of like Facebook marketing campaigns where we target students across the country. So it's kind of a three-pronged approach, basically, both reaching out to the universities, different departments, the student unions, working with the RAG societies, and other societies as well, and then also just general marketing as well.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Rachel. Okay, so our next question is about the recordings and whether they will be available. Yes, they will be available. We are working on having all the content ready for all of our attendees and panelists. It will all be available, and we're working very hard to make sure that anything you've missed will be available for you to catch up with and carry on with the learnings. Moving on to the next question, it's what are the predictions for fundraising trends over the coming months?
Well, I'm happy to take that one first. I think it's been really interesting, the learnings that we've got about virtual fundraising, and I totally accept what Rachel says about pub quizzes and us all getting bored of pub quizzes. I think what's going to happen is that fundraisers are going to become more social. I think people want that connection at the moment, and they want it more than ever, you know, now that we're going into lockdown again. So I think the trick is not to make it virtual, as in we're just doing what we'd normally do but going online, but using that online aspect of it to help people get more engaged over a longer term of doing a challenge or something like that. So rather than fundraising being a, you know, let's all get together and do something today, or, you know, for an hour, it's about making a more longitudinal type of engagement. And it gives the opportunity as well for people to get chatting to people that they might not normally have done, who share common interests with them. So rather than being kind of railroaded into doing some kind of charity event that you don't particularly want to do, you can now choose what you want to do and get together with like-minded people.
Okay, thank you, Angela. That's very helpful. Okay, so our next question is, what is the one thing charities can do to make their causes more memorable?
I'm happy to start on this one. I think it's obviously a difficult one, because I think everyone that works for a charity thinks that their cause is really memorable because you're living it every day. So it's really trying to think outside the box and think about like how other people might perceive you and what's going to make you like stick in somebody else's mind. And I think right now the best thing to do is just try and make yourself relevant to people's experiences. So obviously we're going through like unprecedented times. No one's experienced anything like this before. To try and make yourself memorable in this difficult and new environment that we're navigating, it's just like think of something relevant. So for Dig Deep, it's quite obvious, like we're a water and sanitation charity, so obviously the importance of hand washing has, you know, it's never been more important to us, and it's really at the forefront of our mind as, you know, people living through a pandemic. So that's a really obvious like relevance. But I think if people kind of really sit down and think about, right, where's a similarity between something that I've experienced? Is it something to do with like my job or anything like that, and try and find a relevance where someone, like where donors might think, oh, that really draws me in, and then that might make their charity more relevant to donors and supporters.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next question from Francesca, who asks, how do you motivate students to fundraise?
Back to me again. Students, like they're a great, amazing, like passionate group of people, and if they're excited about something, they will go like 100 miles per hour when it comes to it. I'm sure Tom's got lots to say on this as well, but it's not hard to motivate them. You just need to get them excited about something. You need to give them the support that they need. I think often, you know, they're typically younger people. They may have never done any fundraising before. It may be their first interaction with a charity. So giving them the support and the encouragement is the way that you really motivate them, because then they feel like they're part of this community and it's an exciting thing to do, and then they will go and go and go. But if you just kind of leave them on their own, then they're not going to feel like they want to give back to you, basically.
Yeah, definitely. I just to echo that and what Rachel said, I spent a long time working in student fundraising, and you have to treat them as new donors, but also look at the kind of lifetime value that they're going to bring to your organization. It's not a kind of flash in the pan. They come in, they do something, and off they go. You have to really nurture them, and that is a little bit about investing as well, making sure you have the resources, you speak their language, and you give them something back. So when they are fundraising £1,000, £2,000, £3,000, they're getting something back, whether it's a really memorable experience through a big event, or it's the chance to fundraise as part of a community if it is a virtual event.
Okay, great. Thank you both for that. Very helpful. Our next question is, what key takeaway could each of you give me to start this process?
Yeah, shall I start on that one? I think that I would say that you need to be more joined up in the way that you think. So rather than just kind of kicking off a certain type of event, you have to think about it at the start about how you're going to integrate social with potentially some kind of physical event as well that people might be doing on their own. So you need to think about how the experience will be all together for somebody. You know, what are they going to get out of it other than supporting your charity? You know, because you've got to connect with somebody and give them something as well.
Yeah, I think I'd echo that, but I'd also, taking a step back from that, I'd look at all of the different touch points that you have online and think about how all your supporters over the past 6 months have interacted with you online in different ways, and figure out where the gaps are. Where are they seeing a third-party brand? Where are they seeing a piece of messaging that maybe is not yours, you don't control? Like, what is the broader picture? I think often charities can get into the mistake of acting in silos, so their communications team and their fundraising team can kind of run in parallel but not talk to each other. Getting those people around a room or around a Zoom and actually discussing, like, how do we have a really joined up approach to this, making sure that brand is front and center. So whatever product you have, whatever you push out there, whether it's gin tasting or anything else, you have a really joined up approach to all those different brand touch points. So it's always your brand first and foremost.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. I think, like, my main thing, it kind of leads perfectly on from what Tom was saying, is just simplify. I think we're all really guilty of trying to think, like, what are we going to say now to, like, advertise this new event, or what are we going to say now for this new campaign? You don't need to say anything new. You just need messaging that is, like, you know, really repetitive, really simple. It goes across everything. So if someone ends up on your website or your Facebook page or an event page on Eventbrite or like Strava event or whatever, they know who's talking to them. It's not different words, different sentences, different images. So just keep it really, really simple, and then it's so much easier.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you so much. Thank you to Angela, Rachel and Tom. Thank you for joining us.